Hey, everybody. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Evan. I'm the COO. I work as the COO at One for the World. My main areas of responsibility are grad chapter management, new chapter expansion, marketing, and donor communications. And yeah, just to reiterate what Jack said, I remember, so I founded, co-founded, and then co-led the Villanova chapter um, in 2017 and 2018. And I remember my first chapter leaders meeting in January 2018 in New York. Nadav was there, Josh was there, Kenna might have been there, and it was about 12 people. And 2.5 years later, we're having 10x that number of chapter leaders tune in this weekend and last weekend. So it's just really cool to be here. And my job today is to very quickly review the virtual fall strategy and kind of distill the key takeaways and then pass it over to Charles, who's going to review the social media best practices, which is kind of a key but separate piece of our virtual fall strategy. And then the key part about this session is for you to ask any questions that you have. So please, as questions come up, as I talk and as Charles talks, drop them in the chat. Jack will curate them, and then we will have a couple minutes to answer or try to answer some of those questions at the end. One for the World HQ spent a lot of time this summer working with chapter leaders to determine how we could still advocate for people living in extreme poverty, educate people about this idea of effective giving, and motivate people to consider taking the 1% pledge, even in an entirely virtual environment. And this is what we came up with, this funnel of engagement, emphasis on the fun. And the first piece of that is our One for the World HQ speaker series. And Jack has done an unbelievable job over the last couple of weeks recruiting an incredible roster of speakers. And so these speakers will be coming online Friday afternoons, Eastern Standard Time. We're going to start out with Josh, our co-founder, in 2 weeks. And then we have people like Peter Singer, Will McCaskill, Toby Ord, and a couple of the really awesome people from the One for the World Effective Giving Network to basically provide engaging content to you and your chapters and your schools so that people can be introduced to One for the World. The key thing that you and your chapters should remember about this kind of part of the funnel is that we just want to get everyone and their cousin to this speaker series. So any email, text, Instagram post, smoke signal that you sent out this fall, we want the Zoom registration link to be on it. And you can find that both on our website, and then Kenan and I will be posting that on the Slack and in the weekly chapter leaders newsletter. So after the speaker series and after we've engaged all these people, you'll have the opportunity to see all of the names and emails of folks that attended the speaker series from your school. Then we want to be inviting those people to what we're calling giving lunches. Giving lunches are half-an-hour discussions, basically, about different approaches to giving. And we're incentivizing people to come by offering them a $10 donation to a charity of their choice. And this is much more discussion-based. And again, it's not really a sales pitch. You'll be going over this later in smaller groups, but it's not so much a sales pitch, but as an overview of kind of the different approaches. And you want to be engaging people, asking them questions about their giving. And we're hoping that these giving lunches take people from informed about One for the World and effective giving to really excited about it. And we're hoping that some people at that stage will pledge, but the chances are better than not that a couple folks won't. And that's where the last piece of this funnel comes in, direct virtual outreach. And this is just getting on FaceTime, Zoom chats, Google Meets with people who have attended speaker series, who have attended a giving lunch, but who haven't actually taken the pledge yet. And these are just an incredible opportunity to create space to address people's concerns and questions about One for the World, right? Like, I'm sure some of you saw One for the World and were immediately convinced, but I'm sure some of you also had questions. I certainly did. And it was getting on a call with Josh and Nadav and asking those questions that really made me fall in love with this movement. And we want to create that same space for folks throughout this fall. And then kind of we're hoping that funnel in its totality will lead to pledges. And then the final part of the virtual fall strategy is the Just One initiative, which is really just like a handy benchmark for you and your team. And the idea is that if every member of a One for the World chapter gets just one other person to take the pledge this fall, we will raise somewhere around $500,000 in pledged annualized donations for the world's most effective charities serving the global poor. And I think that in a time as unprecedented as this fall will be for everyone, I think having an approachable goal for you and your teams this fall is really important. And just thinking about having one conversation, right? One conversation where someone realizes that they do believe in what we're doing, they do believe in the idea of effective giving, and they do want to take the pledge, we can have an unbelievable impact this fall. And last but certainly not least, about the virtual fall strategy is that a key component that isn't on this slide is the chapter leader Slack. We want you experimenting and iterating with the strategy, running your own events, creating your own marketing materials, etc. Right? We always try to give chapter leaders as much autonomy as possible. The only thing that we ask is that you share what you learn and what you create with other chapter leaders on the chapter leaders Slack. If anybody isn't on the chapter leader Slack or doesn't know how to get there, please just chat me directly and I will send you the link. There you can connect directly with other chapter leaders, join specific groups for marketing or for pledge weeks, and that will not only help One for the World be more successful in the medium to long term, it will literally help other chapter leaders be more successful this fall. So I think I'm just about at time. So I'm actually going to hand it over to the absolute monster and marketing guru, Charles, to review our social media best practices.
Hello, thank you, Evan. Calling in from a library, seemingly. I won't be whispering. Okay, guys, going to try and keep this brief and interesting. Social media is more important than ever, obviously, because COVID has fucked up all in-person interactions. I really want you to think about social media as a really important thing, obviously, but a really high impact thing. So I don't know if many of you have tried to plan events for One for the World stuff, but it often takes a ton of time, 10 to 20 hours easily, let's say, of meeting. And there's not always a guarantee you're going to get results from that. A parallel example of something you can do with social media is post on your personal story once a week about One for the World, and always saying when you post, reach out to me if you want to know more. I guarantee you that will lead to 1 or 2 pledges, and that takes about 1 minute of effort to post. So social media is really important because of the digital landscape that we now use to engage with people, but also just a really high impact and return on investment. When I think about the nuts and bolts and the essential essence of One for the World, as someone who's done this for 2 years now, it's just about having conversations with people and getting them then to take the pledge. That is everything we're doing. It's just about trying to have as many conversations with people who might actually give a shit and might actually pledge. So what you need to think about is, how am I going to facilitate conversations using social media to then get pledges? So what that looks like is posting on your stories and saying, hey, please be reaching out if you want to know more. It's really easy and it's really simple, but that's ultimately at the end of the day what we need to be doing, because we're just, again, trying to have conversations with interested, like-minded people and telling them about this really awesome solution that's also really hard to say no to. Let me look at my notes. Last one really big thing is we really want you guys taking advantage of resources. So we have this really epic Canva file with a shit ton of really nice graphics. We've got a Google Drive with pre-made social media content. Please be looking at that stuff and please be using it, because we don't want you guys reinventing the wheel. We want you to be using your time effectively and taking what we have, but then also running with that. And so what we really want is, again, use the resources we provide, but then also with that, take the Canva files, do your thing, have fun with it, make new stuff, and then also share it with the Slack and share it with the Instagram DMs so that other people can also use it. Last thing, now more than ever, it's a really good time to have someone dedicated to social media on your team. And I would say, think about, there's a ton of really valuable skills you're learning from social media. A lot of people are hiring for those fields. So that's another just added benefit if you want to have someone specifically designated for that. That is pretty much it. Again, social media is really important, and if we can have conversations where the focus is One for the World and the person is actually listening to us, we're going to raise a shit ton of money for these charities, because once you have these conversations, people say yes. People say, oh, how could anyone say no to this? And they say, yeah, I'll take the pledge. So again, think about, how am I going to use social media to facilitate having more conversations with peers, with parents, et cetera, et cetera. And just last thing, please don't be a stranger. Please reach out. I've had a ton of calls with people on here. Really happy to help always. So yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks for calling me out for the library background. I should have a much better background now. Cool. One last thing that Charles hit on that I forgot to mention that I just really want to drive home is that for everything that Charles just talked about, and including everything that I talked about, there are video resources on the Chapter Leaders resource website, right? So if you have a single question about how to give a gaming lunch, or kind of what are the first things you should do when building a social media presence, or if you want to watch Kenan and I awkwardly go through a pitch, like, we have recorded videos and text on the website for you. So if you literally forget everything that we say today, that's fine. Go to the Chapter Leaders resource. You'll be able to find everything you need for this fall. And if you can't find what you're looking for, just ping myself or Kenan, whoever your chapter manager is. Cool. So now we've left a couple minutes for questions about the fall strategy and about social media. So we will give folks a second to ask those. Jack, I don't know if you've gotten any privately
we've got a deluge, mate. We've got a deluge. So I'm gonna start and hope that we can get through them all. Really good questions as well. So Andy at Harvard Law asked, does the just one 400K recruitment figure that we were quoting earlier, so we said if everyone just gets one pledge, we'll raise 400K an annual run rate, does that presuppose that that's the board member themselves pledging plus one other, or is that just the new pledges that we would raise if every person raised one pledge?
That is just the new pledges. So we took the kind of average number of members per chapter, and we multiplied that number by the average donor lifetime value to get that number. So that's actually not excluding. So if pretend if no one on here is taking the call, or excuse me, taking the pledge, if everyone on this call takes the pledge and as well get someone else, we're going to be closing in on about $1 million of pledge annual donations raised this fall.
Fantastic. Okay, another question. Sorry, I have to scroll back up because there are so many. This is from Robert at what I think is Washington University, WUSTL Law. Anyway, wherever that is there another way to measure success besides just 1% pledges? I feel that a chapter who can also just reach out to alumni donors and solicit one-off donations to effective charities could also make an impact. Is that all of what a chapter should be doing, or is it just part of it? I might take that question if that's okay, guys.
Okay.
So there are absolutely two things that we say that One for the World does, and we really believe this. So the number one is we educate people about effective giving. And I would argue that you can't get someone to take the pledge unless you have educated them about effective giving in a way that really makes them buy into it. And to give you some example of what that looks like, we have a live feed in our Slack that we use for the staff of every single pledge. And we see people who pledge $1 a month, or $10 a quarter starting in 4 years' time, or kind of $10 a month. And that usually says to us that they haven't fully bought the arguments that we're putting forward, right? Because that's clearly not 1% of their income. And that seems to me like a bit of a hedge. So we really want you to educate people about effective giving. And that's what a lot of the tools we're giving you are to do. That being said, we see people taking the pledge as a serious sign of commitment that they have bought into this line of argument. And that's not just us who see that, that's also the wider effective altruism community. It was described to me by the leader of the Center for Effective Altruism, who used to run a One for the World chapter at Stanford GSB. She said, taking a pledge gives great scaffolding for people to get more involved intellectually in the movement. And it's worth saying that in a recent member survey, 1 in 3 of the people who responded had actually made a career decision based on the principle of effective giving and effective altruism. So you're absolutely right, Robert. We do want people to do both, but we do see pledges as very important. Okay. Another great question from Casey at Northwestern. How often do pitches go wrong, and what do we do when that happens, when the person that we're talking to just is not buying the argument?
That's a great question, and Kenan will touch on this much more later when he talks about virtual pitching. But not everyone's going to say yes to taking the One for the World 1% pledge. I promise you that. We probably had a success rate of about 4, maybe 5 out of 10 folks when I was at Villanova for each conversation that we had. So, coming up to 50%, which is great. But there are other people for various reasons who will just say no. And you know what? That's absolutely okay. We are not here to moralize or lecture or twist anybody's arm. We think this is an amazing opportunity to help some of the world's most vulnerable people. And if people, for whatever reason, are just unconvinced or don't want to, that's okay. And we definitely want to kind of invest our time and energy into finding the people that do. Because like Charles said, I promise you, a good portion of your campus will hear about One for the World, the light will go on, and they will take the pledge. We just need to find those people and kind of expose them to this idea of effective giving and effective altruism. Yeah, but Kenan will be talking about that more later, and then you'll have actually a good amount of time to do some pitch practicing yourself. So feel free to role play people who are just absolutely obstinate.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Evan. So next question. So just scrolling down. From John at Boston College. A question about giving lunches. I know the cadence recommended was once a month in the week after the speaker series, but how can we be sure we rope in the most people accessible to come to giving lunches so soon after the speaker series? Is it a doodle, or do we just set a time and hope? Again, if you're happy to, I'll take this one. So what we've done is offer a variety of dates, and actually HQ are offering them as well. So we'll share with you later, there's a page on our website just for the speaker series, but it has a permanent spot on it for giving lunches where people can just sign up. And at the moment we're offering, I think I'm offering like 10 or something in the next few months. Mm-hmm. I think, John, if it's a really small group where you can send a doodle round and deal with all the admin back and forth that you'll have, that's a great way to do it. But my experience in general is you kind of have to pick a few times and try and mix it up in terms of day of the week and time of day, and just go for it. Otherwise, you end up kind of having to make difficult choices when you can't get everybody to agree on consensus. So I think I would set a few dates and advertise those. And then I always put a little thing at the end saying, if you can't make any of these, just message me and I'll talk to you one-to-one.
And the only other thing I would add to that, and John, that's an incredible question, I expect nothing less from you, is that there are multiple chapter leaders who have reached out and talked about running multiple giving lunches in a month, right? So if you don't run a giving lunch in September, but want to run 4 in October, that's absolutely fine. We just set that cadence up as a potential recommendation. We don't want to kind of overburden any chapters, but chapters with a strong leadership team can run multiple giving lunches in a month. It only takes one person to actually run one. So if you have a team of 5, you can be running 5 a week if people have the capacity to run a giving lunch each week. So yeah, don't let our kind of proposed mock schedule deter you from running as many giving lunches as you think is going to be optimal at your school.
Excellent, thank you. So we also have a question from Michael, which I think was posted to everybody. So he said, when you're going to do the virtual pitch, do you want to let people know when you reach out that it's going to be a pitch, or do you, and that you're going to try and help them sign up on the spot, or do you think that will deter people? Go on.
I was just going to say, if you've watched the video of Kenan and I, he, in the beginning of the conversation, talks about the fact that he's going to ask me to make the pledge at the end of the call. And I kind of expected that. So we're hopefully going to be doing direct virtual outreach to people that have attended a speaker event or attended a giving lunch, or hopefully both, right? So they know what One for the World's all about. And if we're getting on a one-to-one call with them, I think they should probably expect that we're going to ask them to take the pledge that our organization is all about. But I completely agree with you, Michael, that if it's the first time interacting with someone and it's like, hey, I really want you to do something, the chances of them doing that are very low. We had a conversion rate of about 1 of 10 at the table during Pledge Week for people that we had never interacted with before. So not to get salesy, but we have cold leads and we have warm leads. With the cold leads, coming in, first conversation, 15 minutes in, hey, do you want to take this pledge? It's probably not going to go well, and it might even turn some people off. But with the warm leads, the people that you've been talking to throughout the semester, that follow your social media, that have attended a giving lunch, these are people that know what we're about. And when they get on these one-to-one conversations, we're hopefully just answering any last questions that they have.
Excellent. A couple of quick questions that I think we can just point people to resources with. So Angeles at FSU said, where can they get Evan's amazing Zoom background? Charles or Evan, where can people find that?
So that's on Canva. The link that's on the CLR is seemingly dead, so I'm going to post a link in the Zoom. And basically, it's sort of like Google Drive, where you're accessing templates, and then we want you guys making copies of these files, and then you can customize them for yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, and I will be introducing that as well, so you don't have to look at my bedroom very shortly. Sabrina has asked a question about, as a new chapter, would you recommend building our executive board this semester or waiting until we're back on campus to build our club's internal structure? I'm worried that many of the normal leadership roles won't be applicable in this semester. We've actually got a whole section after the end of the chapter leaders meeting just on running an effective board, so I would point you towards that. But just in general, I would say it is never too early to start. And if you have to vary the roles a bit, I personally would say it's not worth waiting a whole semester and hoping that we go back in person, particularly this year where, you know, we probably forget this now, but at HQ, we didn't even know if we wouldn't all be on campus at this point a few months ago. And now that seems like that was desperately optimistic. But I would say to you, if you want to vary exactly what the roles are, that's fine. But I would start recruiting early and get some help. Okay, really, really good question here. I'm going to persevere with the questions, guys, because I think they're great. We'll cut into the next session a bit. How would you change, this is Stanley from Stanford, how would you change your recruitment message towards low-income students when 1% sounds very significant for them? Great question.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And obviously we want to be sensitive to the kind of different economic realities of the people that we're going to be talking to. So yeah, that should be said at the outset. And obviously if people just cannot afford this pledge, then we obviously don't want to pressure or guilt anyone, like I was saying earlier, into doing it. But at One for the World, we do believe that it's entirely reasonable to live on 99% of your income. We think that 1% difference for most people, almost everyone that we're going to be talking to over the next couple of months, is not going to be life or death. But for our beneficiaries, it could be. So just the relative and marginal impact of that 1%, we want to stress. But yes, obviously, if someone really cannot afford it and it's not within their economic reality, then we don't want to pressure them. I feel like there's more to be said there. Jack, did you have anything to add?
Well, one thing that I would point you towards is obviously the point of 1% is basically to be scalable, right? So if you don't earn so much, it should still be affordable. There is a flaw to that, though, right? There is a point where people really are struggling to make ends meet, especially in high cost of living cities, and we wouldn't want to be tone deaf there. So what I would say is there's a fantastic video by Peter Singer that we recorded at Princeton last year that's been on our social media, and we'll send it out again afterwards, where he, in a really non-confrontational way, runs through why a pledge is appropriate even if you're not earning very much. And it's a great, what I think he does really well, probably because he's one of the best ethicists in the world, is he says, look, it would be totally reasonable to say that you couldn't possibly give to other people if you never drank anything except water that came out of the tap. And if you wore your clothes until they wore out and never bought clothes except when the ones you have are totally unfunctional, and you never went on holiday, or if you did, you hitchhiked and you slept rough and so on and so forth. But assuming that that's not the case, we're all of us are probably spending things on items that we don't actually need, and so we have the potential to help people. And if we think it's important, we can try to sacrifice something small for us to make a big change for somebody else. And I really love that line of argument that's not accusatory, saying you need to do better, this is immoral, you need to do better. It's just a great way of saying, we all collectively, all of us, have little luxuries in life that we don't need. So I think it's probably a combination of being sensitive to their circumstances, pointing out that 1% goes up and down depending on how much you earn, but also look to the best. And he is, I think, probably the best person for arguing this that I've seen.